Coming up on a newscast, Moodys maintained a stable outlook for South Korea's credit ratings. At Aa2, it's the third highest level of the company's standards. Russian troops in Ukraine continue their assault by air and underground in Mariupol. The attacks focus on the Azov-style steelworks, the region's last pocket of resistance. South Korea continues to see declining daily COVID-19 tallies. Data also shows the pandemic contributed to doubling the obesity rate in the past 4 years. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. South Korea continues to see an overall decline in daily COVID-19 figures. 90,867 reported as of Thursday midnight, some 20,000 fewer than the day before. By 6 p.m., more than 65,000 cases were added. Authorities review plans to lift outdoor mask mandate. People won't have to keep a 2-meter distance if they are not wearing masks. However, the rules on mask wearing indoors will remain for now. Authorities warned of a potential resurgence in late fall, which could see virus-related deaths spike. Some experts advise a second booster shot to prevent a new wave of infections in the autumn. Obesity has more than doubled over the last 4 years here in the nation, particularly since the start of the pandemic due to strict virus protocols at gyms and more people ordering fast food. COVID-19 patients were found to be more vulnerable to side effects like loss of smell or problems with blood circulation. Kim Sang-min zooms in on such impacts of the outbreak.
Obesity in South Korea has more than doubled over the past 4 years, with the number of patients accelerating since the COVID-19 pandemic in particular. According to the country's Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service on Thursday, there were some 30,000 obesity patients in the country last year, a huge jump from around 15,000 in 2017. While the figure was trending upward already, it grew faster after the virus really started taking its toll on people's lives in 2020. This, as many people were discouraged from exercising due to virus prevention measures, with gyms and both indoor and outdoor sports facilities shutting temporarily or closing earlier than usual. The sudden spike in food delivery since the pandemic also exacerbated the problem. Unhealthy eating habits also led to the increase of people who lack proper nutrition. As fast food took up a large portion of what was being delivered, people with nutrient deficiencies rose to more than 335,000 last year. While the social restrictions that were a factor in all that are about to become a thing of the past, they will still leave a lasting impact. One of them is long COVID. Research led by Professor Jang Tae-ik from Ilsan Hospital shows during the first 3 months after catching COVID-19, patients were at risk of losing their sense of smell 5 times more when compared to people with the flu. They were also almost 4 times more vulnerable to pulmonary emboliform and nearly 3 times more likely to suffer from venous thromboembolism. Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
Small businesses can expect more financial assistance. This could include extension on loans and tax payments. They'll likely be compensated for 100% of the losses incurred from the pandemic restrictions. Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
Yoon's Transition Committee is fine-tuning what it calls a comprehensive relief package for businesses. A major part will be emergency financial assistance, whose purpose has 3 main parts.
The goal of the plan is to lower the interest burden on borrowers, extend maturity dates for loans, and forgive or reduce excessive debt.
The last part, the debt problem, was something the committee chair An Chol-soo emphasized previously when suggesting a robust program of business relief. He even mentioned the possibility of setting up a so-called bad bank, an entity that will absorb illiquid assets and non-performing loans.
We're not quite yet prepared to talk about a bad bank, but we are looking through specific measures to reduce the burden of debt.
Meanwhile, the committee says it's been scientifically analyzing the actual scale of business losses to draw up a new scheme for compensation. That would include retroactive compensation for those who are not covered in previous compensation schemes like the tourism sector. And instead of 90% compensation, businesses could get up to 100%. The minimum relief payment could be raised to as much as double the current 500,000 Korean won. Separate from the compensation, there could be 6 million Korean won paid out in assistance to each business. To pay all this, President-elect Yoon previously pledged to secure an extra budget worth some $40 billion. But it's highly likely to be closer to $25 or $30 billion, excluding the extra budget already passed earlier this year under the Moon administration. The committee will sort out the details in the coming days and announce the final plan next week, which could help its extra budget bill take shape too. 이경은 아리랑 뉴스.
So far this month, South Korea's exports are up almost 17% on year, but imports are rising faster, which means the country could end up posting a rare trade deficit for a second straight month. Here's Yoon Suk-yeol with a breakdown of the digits.
South Korea's exports have soared almost 17% in the first 20 days of this month. According to the Korea Customs Service on Thursday, exports from April 1st to April 20th amounted to $36.3 billion, up 16.9% from a year earlier. It's a higher growth than in the first 20 days of March, when outbound shipments climbed 10.1% on year. The rise in exports was mostly attributed to strong demand for chips and petroleum products. Outbound shipments of semiconductors rose nearly 23%, while petroleum products jumped 82% as the war in Ukraine pushed up global oil prices. While exports of auto parts rose about 4%, exports of cars fell 1% amid a global shortage of auto chips. Overall, exports to the country's major trading partners expanded as well. Shipments to China grew by about 2%, and those to the U.S. and European Union surged 29% and 12% respectively. Meanwhile, South Korea's imports increased by 25% on year to reach $41.5 billion. This comes as imports of crude oil soared more than 82%, while inbound shipments of petroleum products jumped over 46%. Over the 20-day period in April, South Korea recorded a trade deficit of $5.2 billion as imports continued to grow faster than exports. If this continues for the rest of the month, the country in April may post a trade deficit for the second month in a row. Min Suk-yeol, Arirang News.
The country's new central banker took office today. Rhee Chang-yong pledged to rein in inflation and guide monetary policy in a balanced way. The BOK governor also emphasized the bank's role in addressing other economic issues like household debt and aging society. Ji-young shares with us his remarks.
Ranging from curbing the soaring inflation to recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, it'll be a juggling act for the Bank of Korea's incoming governor, Rhee Chang-yong. President Moon Jae-in officially appointed Lee, former director in charge of Asia-Pacific affairs at the International Monetary Fund, on Thursday, saying that stabilizing inflation should be the top priority. Lee pledged that he'll carry out monetary policy in a balanced manner by taking both economic growth and inflation into account and will be an active advisor to help stabilize the country's economy. During his inaugural address, Lee mentioned economic challenges that stem from geopolitical risks.
In the short term, the prolonged war in Ukraine, faster than expected normalization of the Fed's monetary policy, and China's economic slowdown due to the resurgence of Omicron are causing difficulties when devising monetary policies.
He also said in the long term, South Korea should reform its economic framework to be aimed at a soft landing, taking into account the country's rising household debt and preventing secular stagnation of an aging society and a shrinking workforce.
If our economy fails to overcome the challenges and is mired with prolonged low growth, it will be hard to get out of it. It cannot be done with monetary policy alone, but fiscal policies and structural reforms should be implemented together.
He emphasized the central bank's role, saying that beyond devising monetary policies, through research, it should contribute in coming up with adequate solutions for the country to be on the right track. To this, he identified 3 hurdles to overcome for those working at the BOK. Mentioning his experience at the IMF, where experts from various fields were just one call away, he urged all at the BOK to actively share their expertise. Also, he stressed the need for external communication, saying that the bank's research should be shared through diversified channels. He also called on those at the central bank to also focus on global issues and prepare accordingly, particularly in the digital economy and green finance. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Moodys maintained a stable outlook for South Korea. It also kept the nation's rating at Aa2, the third highest level of the company's standards. The global credit rater said the decision was backed by Seoul's robust growth forecast and a diverse competitive economic structure. The agency maintained the country's 2022 growth outlook at 2.7%, despite increasing global risk from the war in Ukraine. Moodys also cited solid institutional response in preparing for the future challenges like the aging population also helped South Korea's credit profile. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol continues his tour of the southern regions. At a steel plant in Gwangyang, he expressed hopes the industry can prosper and help Korea move towards carbon neutrality. The incoming leader also visited local markets in Gyeongsangnam-do province. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Visiting a steel works in Gwangyang, Jeollanam-do province, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol said he hopes steel can lead the way for Korean industry towards carbon neutrality. He was at the POSCO steel plant on Thursday, saying steelmaking is the foundation of industry and has been pivotal to South Korea's industrial development.
또 4차 산업혁명 그리고 또 탄소 중립 이 모든 것을 우리 제철이 함께 실현해 나가면서 한국 산업의 힘찬 견인차 역할을 해 주실 것을 믿고 기대하고 있습니다.
In the plant's guestbook, Yoon expressed respect for workers, their contributions to the industry, and their devotion and hard work. He was debriefed by staffers on site and met with POSCO's CEO, who said his company has developed its own environmentally friendly technologies over the years and is leading the industry in the use of hydrogen. As part of his 3-day tour to the south of the country, the president-elect visited a local market in Jinju, Gyeongsangnam-do province. He thanked the people for their support in the election and promised to work for the city's economic and industrial prosperity. He also visited a fish market in Masan, where he stressed the importance of a liberal democracy and stabilizing soaring product prices. At an industrial complex in Changwon, Yoon said he will review the current nuclear power phase-out policy and will make the city the mecca of Korea's nuclear power industry as it once was before. Throughout his tour, he emphasized the importance of local economies and the livelihoods of the people. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, South Korea expressed deep disappointment and regret over Japan's prime minister sending a ritual offering to the Yasukuni Shrine, a site honoring the country's war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals. It's a gesture considered provocative by neighbors, including Korea and China. Seoul's foreign ministry spokesperson said in a statement, the government strongly urges Tokyo to face up to history and demonstrate remorse over its wartime past. The Yoon administration's nominee for top diplomat Park Jin also called on Japan to take a sincere and humble attitude on the issue. In Mariupol, around 1,000 people are estimated to be trapped inside a steel plant. Ukraine's lead negotiator proposed a special round of talks to free them. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin ordered Russian forces to continue blocking that area. Kim Yeon-sung has the latest.
Around 1,000 people remain trapped in a steel plant in Mariupol. Russian attacks are closing in on this besieged Ukrainian city. An army commander from inside issued a video plea to say that the people trapped may have only a few days left.
This is our appeal to the world. This could be the last appeal of our lives. We're probably facing our last days, if not hours.
He added that there are about 500 wounded and hundreds of civilians, including women and children. Russia earlier this week had issued a surrender or die demand in the city of Mariupol, wanting fighters to lay down their arms by 2 p.m. Moscow time or 8 p.m. Korea time. If not, Russian forces were ready to storm in. But Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday had a change of plan.
He ordered instead for Russian forces to block off the industrial area, where 1,000 are trapped. Putin demanded the blockade to be airtight.
There is no need to climb into these catacombs and crawl underground through these industrial facilities. Block off this industrial area so that even a fly cannot pass through.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's lead negotiator Mikhailo Podolyak is reaching out to hold special talks with Moscow. He tweeted on Wednesday that Ukraine is ready for negotiations with no conditions. He said that he's hoping to save, quote, our guys. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., the Biden administration will announce another substantial military aid package for Ukraine this week. According to government officials, it is expected to be similar in size to the $800 million package announced last week and will include more artillery and artillery rounds needed in the Donbas region. Russia may be heading towards an historic debt default. Earlier this month, the Kremlin paid back its debt to foreign creditors in rubles rather than dollars. This is because the U.S. imposed sanctions blocked Moscow's access to the dollar reserve and left Russia with limited options. But the Credit Derivatives Determinations Committee ruled Wednesday that rubles are unacceptable means of payment for the dollar-denominated bonds. Rubles have been highly volatile since the start of the war, and counterparties of the credit default swaps market see Russia's payment as a failure to follow through with its debt obligations. If Moscow fails to pay bondholders by May 4th, the end of the grace period, it will face the first default in more than a century. The travel and tourism industry has been hit hard by the pandemic. Business leaders and experts from around the world gathered in Manila to discuss ways to revive the sector. Lee Jae-hyun brings the highlights from that session.
Some say life will never be the same as before the pandemic. But others are looking for ways to boost the travel industry and at least try to navigate a return to normal life. The World Travel and Tourism Council, being one of them, holds an annual WTTC summit. This year, the mission is to maximize the inclusive and sustainable growth potential of the travel industry by partnering with governments, destinations, communities, and other stakeholders. This year's WTTC Summit began on Wednesday in Manila under the theme of Rediscovering Travel, bringing together people from all around the world who share the same values to solve social, economic, and environmental challenges. Over 650 industry leaders from all over the world have gathered to participate in the three-day summit to discuss how governments and businesses should do more with travel restrictions now being lifted in many countries. During the opening ceremony, President and CEO of WTTC, Julia Simpson, spoke about how COVID-19 has affected the global travel industry.
The pandemic rewrote the rule book on how we live and how we travel. It showed how totally interreliant we are. Businesses and governments need each other to make travel happen. And our whole sector relies on the communities who host us.
She also called on China, where borders are still closed, to look for signs of recovery and to reopen its economy to get the millions of people working in travel and tourism back to work. According to research by the WTTC, COVID-19 hit employment in the travel and tourism industry the hardest, with a loss of more than 62 million jobs. However, in 2021, the industry showed steady recovery, regaining 21% of jobs and was worth $5.8 trillion, up $2.2 trillion from 2020. By the end of this year, the industry is expected to be rebound even further and be worth over $8.3 trillion. But Simpson also called for ways to ensure that the industry can cope with another health crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic.
If we're to survive another pandemic, we need to fully integrate a traveller's health status into their digital travel documents. I think a very good example is the EU Green Travel Pass. It's now been adopted by 62 countries. Let's find a single system for the world.
While the 2022 WTTC Summit aims to rediscover the travel industry, it also marks the beginning of a new post-pandemic era for travel and tourism. Lee Jae-hyun, Arirang News, Manila.
More and more films and dramas are being made in collaboration with production companies and even staff and talent from other nations. Amid such trends, South Korea is receiving lots of attention from across the globe as it's considered a country with a rich cultural tapestry. Kim Bo-kyung sheds light on this development.
The movie Minari and drama series Pachinko are both made in the U.S. But as we all know already, they talk about Korean immigrant stories and star Korean actors. And the film Broker, which was recently selected for the competition section of the 75th Cannes Film Festival, is a Korean film, but directed by an award-winning Japanese auteur, Koreeda Hirokazu. Globalization and diversification mean more jointly produced movies are being made, crossing borders when choosing their staff, actors, plots, and shooting location.
Yes, like a product, a film has its nationality, mainly decided by which country the production company is based in. Yet, compared to the past when the internet connection wasn't good enough or traveling was not common, most film plots were limited to a single country. But now, with the borders being phased out and with easier connectivity, there's more and more content that many countries can take part in, and thus, films with many identities are being released.
The global film market aims to dig up fresh stories and actors regardless of borders, and South Korea is in the spotlight. A recently released film, Vanishing, is one example. It is French, but it was shot in Korea and stars well-known actor Yoon Suk-yeol. And the horror film titled Omma, which means mom in Korean, starring Sandra Oh, shows how such Korean elements are appearing in Hollywood flicks.
Now, more and more production companies overseas consider Korean-related stories makeable and believe they have a good chance of success. They're getting more interested in Korea.
And it is not just Hollywood that is interested in other countries' stories and history. Korea's film industry, too, is becoming more globalized. Rhee, directed by Korean director Park Ruslan, delivers a story set in Kazakhstan featuring Kazakh or Russian actors. With more jointly made content to come, there is a chance to shed more light on stories that until now have been in the shadows. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
April 21st is Science Day here in South Korea. The capital has introduced an AI food scanner which uses cutting-edge ICT technology to reduce food waste, one of the main causes of greenhouse gas emissions. Song Yoo-jin went to check it out.
Food can bring us pleasure, but at the same time, inflict harm on the earth. In South Korea, about 5.23 million tons of food waste is produced every year, which creates some 8.85 million tons of greenhouse gas. With 1/5 of that coming from the capital Seoul, the city government has taken action. City Hall staff cafeteria used by 2,000 to 3,000 people per day installed artificial intelligence food scanners, which have been in use since April 8th.
When I return my plate, this AI food scanner above scans a plate and in less than a second calculates the amount and the kind of food I left.
Through non-contact scanning, the device measures how much and what kind of food is left by each person. Another scanner is installed where food is served to check which item on the menu is most popular. By analyzing the compiled data, the cafeteria can estimate the amount of food they should cook, and they can create a meal plan that suits the user's tastes. And a dashboard at the entrance shows how many people achieved zero food waste, which means less than 10% of the amount of food set by the cafeteria went uneaten. 100 people achieving zero food waste leads to a 25.5 kilogram reduction in greenhouse gas, which is equal to planting 4 pine trees. Cafeteria users are already feeling the change.
When we are eating, we now talk about how AI is going to scan our leftover food. This makes us think about the environment once again.
After knowing that my plate will be scanned, I'm trying my best to finish all my food.
The city is hoping to become more eco-friendlier by using the scanner.
Last year, 293 tons of food waste came from our staff cafeteria. With the help of the AI food scanner, we hope to reduce at least 10% or 30 tons this year. This will slash 50 tons of greenhouse gas emissions.
The scanner will be tested until December before being expanded to more city-run facilities. 송유진, Arirang News.
Scattered outbreaks of rain are in the forecast for tomorrow. Northern central regions will see 5 millimeters of rainfall. That includes the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province. However, this is not enough rain to alleviate the extreme dryness. Dry weather alerts are forecast to remain in place for most parts of the country. Those across the East Coast should be extra alert. Gusty winds of 20 meters per second will follow for parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. The combination of dry air and gusty winds will bring increased risk of wildfires, so please be careful with anything that can start a fire. Morning lows in Seoul and Jeju will start off at 13 degrees Celsius. Apart from the capital region, daytime highs will rise drastically, causing wide temperature gaps. Gwangju will get up to 25 degrees, Daegu 29, Gyeongju will make it to 30 degrees Celsius. Conditions will be warm this weekend with temperatures hiking up to 26 degrees on Saturday. Next week, nationwide showers are in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.
Find the ways of Taekwondo within yourself. The mind that honors respect and kindness. The valor that fears no challenges.